Okay, here's a little video on how to use SampleCompiler. So you've launched the program, and the first thing you do, almost the first thing you do, is to load some samples in. But actually the very first thing you do is you either leave normalize on load on rather, or you turn it off. If it's on, then anything's imported, it'll look for the loudest part and turn everything up so that that gets near to 100%. I have to say I've tended to find that I don't use it now, and if I need to normalize segments of a sample bank, I'll do it in program like Peak. So let's turn that off for the moment. So the first thing we do is get some samples in. Now you can either drag and drop them from hard drive, like that, which is obviously the quickest if you've got existing sounds, or you can drag and drop off a sample CD. It'll take a little longer because it has to spin the CD up, and so on. There it goes. Right. Okay, so now we've got our initial sample that we want to select things from loaded into buffer number 1. You've got the usual Mac's window scrolling tools here. Not the most wonderful, but they work. So if we go to the hand, the first thing we want to do is scroll in enough to be able to see where the samples start and stop. Then go back to the beam tool. Now, next thing to do before we can hear anything is obviously check the DSP to make sure you're using the right device if you haven't done already. Turn the audio on. Turn up the output. Next thing, before we start copying samples across, is also to set the initial size of the intermediate buffer. Now it defaults to 20 seconds, which for lots of short sounds is probably quite long enough. If you're going to be doing gongs, cymbals, or anything with sustain, then you might want to boost that up to something like 60 seconds, something like that. Okay, we'll leave it on 20 for now. So we select our sound and check it by clicking on Preview Selection. That's a kick drum. Okay, that's fine. Next thing we do is Copy Selection. And you'll see that it copies it into the temporary storage buffer. And over here, you've got the millisecond start and stop times for the sample. Now notice that there is this empty segment from 0 to 99 milliseconds. The program always creates that for creating banks for Live Sampler. If you're using a single device like an infrared sensor to scroll through the different segments, what happens when you take your hand away from the sensor is that the play pointer jumps back to 0 and plays the first segment. If there's a sound there, it means every time you take your hand away, you get a note that you don't want. So I altered this software to make this very small empty segment at the beginning of the buffer. Okay, so that's our first sound. Then what's this one? Okay, it's a little hi-hat. Copy that. Back to the hand. No. One thing you have to watch with this thing here, this toolbar, is it's very easy to think you're pressing one and actually to get a different one. Okay, some more sounds here. So this one is a snare. Now not quite right, so I need to scroll in. Back to the beam. Now if I press the shift button on the keyboard, then I can just scroll the beginning, move rather, the beginning and the end of the sounds manually, like that. There we go. So copy selection. Scroll back out again. Oh, what else have we got on here? I think this is a loop, so these are probably all going to be pretty much the same. Beam. Kick. Alright, let's stick one of those on again as well. Okay. Now one thing you'll find when you're making sample banks for Live Sampler is that you generally want to have 6, 7, 8 different samples in a bank. The reason being that if you think that the range of a sensor is either going from 0 to 127 if it's using MIDI values, or 0 to 1 if it's using audio values. I think your sensors actually have a different range, but it's being scaled internally to 0 point to 1 point. So what that means is, if you've only got 4 samples in a bank, you have to make the whole range of movement with the sensor to be able to play all 4 samples, which means if you're going to have to make potentially very big movements. So if you want more samples to play for the same given range, then what you do is just duplicate what you're copying across into this bank. So you just you might add a couple extra of those, and maybe, although I wouldn't, I'd mix them up if I was doing it, so you get something different happening when you play it. And then some hats. Okay, no. So there we've got a bunch of samples. Over here you can see the related text file, which has the start and stop points for all the samples. Okay, so we've got what we want there. So the next thing is to click on size and copy. What this does is it clears the top buffer, copies back the samples, sample bank you created into the first buffer, takes anything off the end, and you're ready to go. Okay, so we've done that. Then you click on save. Find somewhere to save it. Groove it. Default sounds. And we'll call this drum test. Okay, save that. And then if we go to the actual folder, we'll find, here we go, drum test, that's the A files, and drum test, the text file. So that's that. Some other controls on here. Yes, play with these controls plays the whole buffer rather than the segment that you've, rather the selection that you've selected. What you do is you turn play on, plays once through it. If you then want to start again, you have to press start loop. Obviously you've got loop on. Okay, that's something that needs looking at. Up here you've got a load sound button. Now what this does is opens a file dialog so you can load an audio file from hard drive. However, something has gone strange with it, and if you do that you'll crash the program, so leave that alone basically, because you can do it with the drag and drop either from hard drive or from sample CD. Clear auto relates to this part of the program up here, which is an attempt using a third-party object to be able to slice up an imported set of samples based on where the zero crossings are, but it doesn't work, and I haven't taken it out yet, so ignore that. Reset 2 resets the intermediate, the temporary buffer, like that. If you've started collecting samples, you decide, oh, I didn't like that. But what it doesn't do is create the empty segment at the beginning. So use with caution. The only way to get that empty segment back at the moment is to clear all, which then obviously means you've got to reload whatever you want in your top buffer. Down at the bottom, if you're working with pitch samples, so you've got a whole selection of guitar samples of different pitches, and you only want to pick out the C pitch samples because you're going to use the sensor to control the pitch of the playback, then this is just a little oscillator to help you figure out what you're listening to, unless you've got perfect pitch, of course. So there's your C. So that's just a little thing to help with that. And that's basically it. Once you've created your bank there, you clear all and load something in, start all over again.